The human brain is supposed to be a survival supercomputer, a miraculous chunk of wet biology designed to recognize danger, avoid death, and keep you from doing things like petting a bison, deep frying a frozen turkey, or performing home improvement with the confidence of a man who has confused YouTube with medical school. And yet, every now and then, that supercomputer gets infected. Not by a disease, not by a parasite, but by something far more powerful, a really bad idea. Tonight, we're looking at 10 terminal outbreaks of that virus. These are not freak accidents. These are not acts of God. These are what happen when ego, impatience, vanity, and pure cinematic stupidity all join forces against the basic laws of physics. Consider this a public service announcement wrapped in dark comedy. These stories are exhibits, not instructions. So if at any point you catch yourself thinking, honestly, I could probably pull that off, please understand that is exactly how several people in this video stopped participating in the future. Let's begin with a woman who wanted a faster way to lose weight and accidentally gave herself the world's dumbest vintage makeover. Case 1. The radioactive slimming belt. The pursuit of the perfect body has produced some truly incredible ideas over the years. Some people count calories, some people do Pilates, and some people, apparently, go antique shopping for medically irresponsible death accessories from the atomic age. Sophia lived in a stylish city in Italy, and like millions of people with mirrors, internet access, and a complicated relationship with their own reflection, she was frustrated by how slow the human body insists on changing. She had tried everything: keto, paleo, juice cleanses, hot yoga, workouts named after military training programs, and emotional punishment. But none of it worked fast enough. And fast enough is where human judgment usually begins to leave the room. One afternoon, while wandering through a dusty antique shop, Sophia found what she believed was the answer: a box set of vintage slimming belts from the 1950s. The packaging was immaculate: cheerful pastel colors, smiling women with impossible waists, and marketing copy promising a sleek silhouette through the miraculous power of radiant energy. Now, when something from the 1950s promises radiant energy, that is generally your cue to put it down, back away slowly, and maybe alert a physicist. Sophia, however, saw elegance. She saw old-world glamour, a forgotten beauty secret, a magical shortcut from a more sophisticated era. What she had actually purchased was a wearable museum exhibit from the period in human history when society briefly decided radiation was basically a vitamin. Inside the belts were sealed capsules containing low-grade radioactive material, most likely radium-226. In that wonderfully insane post-war atomic craze, radiation had been marketed as modern, glamorous, and somehow healthy. People put it in creams, water, beauty devices, and apparently now, slimming belts designed to slowly cook your waistline with science-flavored optimism. Sophia began wearing the belts every day, tightly, faithfully, for hours at a time. The warmth against her skin felt reassuring, encouraging, like the belts were doing exactly what they promised. And, in a sense, they were. She did begin to lose weight. Because when your body is being quietly poisoned by radiation, you do, in fact, become less physically robust. Unfortunately, she interpreted the warning signs as success: fatigue, detox, nausea, cleansing, metallic taste in her mouth, the process working. In reality, her bone marrow was being damaged, her cells were being shredded, and her internal systems were failing under a constant, close-range assault of radiation. She wasn't getting a beauty treatment. She was marinating her organs in retro-stupidity. By the time the truth became unavoidable, it was far too late. The belts had not melted the fat away. They had simply started unmaking her from the inside. She wanted effortless glamour. What she got instead was a final, intimate lesson in why the past should not be trusted just because it had pretty packaging. The 1950s gave us great cars, excellent jazz, and apparently a belt that could kill you while promising a smaller waist. A truly incredible era for confidence, and absolutely terrible for consumer safety. Case 2. The Oil Pipeline Buffet. In rural Brazil, where massive oil pipelines snake across the countryside like giant steel veins, a man named Marco had developed a personal philosophy about economics. It was simple. If something is expensive, and you can technically reach it, then maybe it doesn't actually belong to anyone. Now, most people see a high-pressure industrial oil pipeline and think things like critical infrastructure, dangerous, probably not something I should drill into. Marco saw something different. He saw a very long tube filled with free gasoline, and as fuel prices continued to climb, the temptation became irresistible. Why pay for gas when there was an entire river of it flowing through a steel pipe right across the countryside? All he needed to do was tap it. In his mind, this was basically the same concept as tapping a maple tree. Drill a hole, attach a pipe, collect delicious free liquid energy. Unfortunately for Marco, oil pipelines are not maple trees. They are massive industrial systems designed to move crude oil across entire continents under extreme pressure. We're talking about internal pressures that can exceed 1,000 pounds per square inch. For reference, that's enough force to turn a small hole into something resembling a hydraulic cannon. But Marco had a drill and confidence, which, historically, has been the starter pack for many very short stories. He picked a remote section of pipeline far away from roads or witnesses and brought along a toolkit that could best be described as optimistic. A heavy-duty drill, a portable generator, some salvaged pipes, and a rusty gate valve he planned to attach once the oil started flowing. Then he began drilling. The reinforced steel pipe fought back, hard. These pipelines are designed to survive corrosion, earthquakes, and time itself. For hours, Marco battled the metal wall, sweat pouring, drill screaming, generator coughing like a chainsaw choir. Finally, the drill bit broke through. And at first, it looked like success. A tiny trickle of black crude oil seeped out. Marco had done it. He was standing next to what he believed was the world's largest illegal gas pump. Then physics woke up, because the moment that tiny hole opened, the pressure inside the pipeline did what pressure does. It equalized, instantly. The gentle trickle transformed into a high-pressure jet of crude oil that erupted from the pipe with the force of an industrial water cutter. Imagine a fire hose. Now imagine that fire hose is blasting liquid asphalt at highway speed. The jet struck Marco square in the chest. The impact was devastating. Witnesses later compared it to the force of being hit by a speeding car. The pressure launched him off his feet like a rag doll. He flew backward through the air and slammed violently into a nearby tree. The collision ended everything instantly. Meanwhile, the pipeline continued doing what pipelines do best. Oil blasted high into the air in a thick, black geyser, raining down across the surrounding field like a monument to catastrophic overconfidence. Emergency crews later arrived to shut the line down. What they found was a scene that perfectly summarized Marco's business plan. A drill. A pipe. A hole in a billion-dollar piece of infrastructure. And a man who had attempted to turn an industrial energy artery into his personal free refueling station. In the end, Marco had tried to steal a little bit of oil. Instead, he released a force powerful enough to throw a grown man across a field. It turns out that pipelines do, in fact, share one thing in common with maple trees. They both punish people who don't understand how pressure works. Case 3. The fruit-only wellness prophet. In the modern age, health advice comes from many places: doctors, nutritionists, scientific research, and, of course, people on the internet who look vaguely glowing while holding a smoothie. Freya was one of those people. An Australian wellness influencer with a rapidly growing online following, Freya had built her brand around a single radical belief: that humanity's perfect diet was fruit. Not mostly fruit. Not fruit as part of a balanced meal. Just fruit. According to Freya, every other food group was unnecessary at best and toxic at worst. Meat? Poison. Dairy? Mucus. Grains? A conspiracy. Protein? Apparently optional. Fruit, she insisted, was the ultimate food. Nature's flawless nutritional package. Her social media feeds were a colorful explosion of mango bowls, watermelon platters, rainbow smoothies, and long spiritual captions about cleansing the body's natural energy. To her followers, Freya wasn't just healthy, she looked transcendent, thin, radiant, almost ethereal. Unfortunately, there is a very big difference between looking healthy in a filtered photograph and actually being healthy inside a body that still obeys basic biology. For years, Freya lived almost entirely on fruit. Bananas, melons, mangoes, durian, jackfruit, anything sweet and colorful. Now, fruits are wonderful foods. They contain vitamins, fiber, antioxidants. They also contain something else in very large quantities: sugar, specifically fructose. And when your diet consists almost entirely of sugar, while removing most sources of protein, fat, and balanced nutrients, the human body begins to experience what doctors refer to as a catastrophic metabolic mess. Freya's pancreas was working overtime, constantly producing insulin to manage the endless waves of sugar entering her bloodstream. Day after day, month after month, year after year, her body was running a marathon it was never designed to run, and eventually, systems began to fail. But Freya interpreted every warning sign as progress: weight loss, detox, fatigue, spiritual cleansing, weakness, purification. Her followers cheered her on as her body slowly consumed itself in the name of purity. Then one day, everything collapsed. Freya's body entered a condition known as diabetic ketoacidosis, or DKA. This is not a gentle health issue. It is a full-scale metabolic emergency. When the body can no longer manage blood sugar properly, it begins desperately burning fat for energy. That process floods the bloodstream with acidic compounds called ketones. The blood slowly becomes toxic, organs begin shutting down. The body, in a very real sense, starts poisoning itself. Freya had spent years preaching that fruit was the ultimate health food, and technically she was correct. Fruit is healthy, just not when your entire diet is basically the produce aisle of a supermarket and nothing else. The influencer who had promised her followers radiant health, spiritual clarity, and perfect natural balance had accidentally engineered the exact opposite: a metabolic collapse powered almost entirely by mangoes. Her story became a quiet cautionary tale buried beneath thousands of glowing wellness posts still floating around the internet. Because in the world of online health advice, confidence is often mistaken for knowledge, and sometimes the most dangerous diet in the world is the one that sounds the most pure. Case 4. The Thanksgiving Deep Fryer Catastrophe. Every year in the United States, Thanksgiving arrives with the same familiar ingredients: family, football, turkey, and at least one relative who believes they have discovered a revolutionary cooking technique that will change history. Bill was that relative. Bill lived in a quiet Texas suburb and had grown deeply dissatisfied with traditional oven-roasted turkey. In his opinion, the bird was always dry, always disappointing, and frankly, unworthy of the culinary glory that Thanksgiving deserved. But then Bill discovered something magical: deep-fried turkey. Online videos showed beautiful golden birds emerging from giant pots of bubbling oil. The skin looked impossibly crispy. The meat looked juicy. The cooks in the videos spoke with the calm confidence of people who had unlocked ancient, forbidden cooking knowledge. Bill was mesmerized. This year, he announced proudly to his family, Thanksgiving dinner would be different. He purchased a massive propane-powered outdoor turkey fryer. The device looked less like kitchen equipment and more like something used to refine crude oil. 30 quarts of steel, 5 gallons of peanut oil, a burner capable of turning dinner into a physics demonstration. On Thanksgiving morning, Bill set everything up on his wooden back porch. Already, this was not ideal. Combining open flame with flammable architecture is generally considered a bold move in home design. But Bill was confident. He filled the pot with oil and fired up the burner. Slowly, the temperature climbed toward the perfect frying temperature, 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Meanwhile, Bill retrieved the turkey, a glorious 20-pound centerpiece. Unfortunately, there was one small detail Bill had overlooked in his excitement. The turkey was still frozen. Not slightly cold, not mostly thawed, frozen solid. Now, if you take one thing away from this story, remember this: ice and boiling oil are enemies. Because when water meets oil that hot, something dramatic happens. Water instantly converts into steam. And when water becomes steam, it expands to more than 100 times its original volume. That expansion has to go somewhere. Bill, smiling proudly as his family gathered around, began lowering the frozen turkey into the pot. The moment the bird touched the oil, physics clocked in for work. The ice trapped inside the turkey instantly flash-boiled into steam. A massive pocket of expanding vapor erupted inside the pot, and that steam violently displaced the oil. 5 gallons of boiling oil shot upward in a towering volcanic explosion. The pot erupted. A geyser of superheated grease sprayed into the air and rained down across the porch. And then something even worse happened. The atomized oil mist drifted down onto the open propane flame beneath the fryer. That mixture, hot oil droplets suspended in air, is basically perfect fuel. The entire scene ignited instantly. What began as cooking became a fireball. Flames erupted across the porch, engulfing the fryer, the deck, and everything around it in a roaring inferno. Bill, standing proudly over his masterpiece seconds earlier, was now at the center of a catastrophic thermodynamics lesson. The house caught fire. Emergency services were called, and the Thanksgiving dinner that was supposed to make Bill a legend instead became a neighborhood cautionary tale about why frozen poultry and industrial oil temperatures should never meet. To this day, fire departments across America show videos of deep fryer explosions as educational material, because nothing teaches thermodynamics quite like watching 5 gallons of boiling oil achieve liftoff. Bill wanted the perfect turkey. Instead, he accidentally hosted the most exciting fireworks show Thanksgiving had ever seen. Case 5. The Bison Selfie. Yellowstone National Park is one of the most beautiful places on Earth. Vast landscapes, ancient geysers, towering mountains, and roughly 2,000 pounds of wildlife that absolutely does not care about your Instagram aesthetic. Every year, park rangers repeat the same simple rule to visitors: stay at least 25 yards away from large animals. That distance exists for a reason. Bison may look calm, slow, and slightly confused, but they are essentially 2,000-pound muscle tanks that can run 3 times faster than the average human. Tiffany, however, did not come to Yellowstone for statistics. She came for content. Like many modern travelers, Tiffany had spent her entire vacation curating a perfect collection of photos. Waterfalls, sunsets, scenic hikes. But something was missing. She needed the photo, the one that would explode on social media. And then she saw it. In the middle of a golden meadow stood a massive bull bison. A 1-ton, prehistoric-looking animal calmly grazing in the sunlight like a National Geographic cover. To most people, this would look like something to admire from a safe distance. To Tiffany, it looked like a selfie opportunity. Ignoring the large warning signs posted throughout the park, she began walking toward the animal. Slowly, carefully, phone already raised in front of her face. Other tourists noticed what she was doing almost immediately. People shouted, "Hey, stay back! That's a bad idea!" Rangers had given this speech 1,000 times before. Bison are unpredictable. Bison are strong. Bison do not enjoy strangers invading their personal space. But Tiffany waved the warnings off with a casual flick of her hand. She wasn't reckless. She was confident. Besides, she wasn't planning to bother the animal. She just needed to get a little closer. 20 yards became 15. 15 became 10. The bison lifted its massive head and let out a low, rumbling snort, the universal language of wildlife that translates roughly to, "Please stop doing whatever you're doing." Tiffany interpreted this differently. To her, the animal looked cooperative. Perfect, actually. Now for the shot. She stepped even closer, turned her back to the massive creature behind her, and lifted her phone for the selfie. Big smile, perfect angle, majestic wildlife backdrop. For a brief moment, everything was exactly how she imagined it. Then the bison decided the photo shoot was over. The enormous animal took a single, powerful step forward and flicked its head in irritation. Not a full charge, not an attack, just the kind of casual motion you might use to swat a fly. But when the fly swatter weighs a ton and has horns the size of steak knives, the results are dramatic. The horn caught Tiffany and launched her into the air like a tossed rag doll. Witnesses later said she traveled nearly 10 feet before crashing back onto the ground. Her phone went flying one direction. Her carefully composed social media moment went another. The bison, apparently satisfied that the photo shoot had concluded, simply returned to grazing. Park rangers and emergency crews arrived quickly, but the outcome had already been decided. The entire event was captured on video by several horrified tourists who had been shouting warnings moments earlier. And yes, the footage did go viral, just not in the way Tiffany had planned. Instead of becoming a glamorous influencer moment, the clip became a very popular reminder of a simple rule about wildlife photography. If your selfie partner weighs a ton, maybe let them finish lunch first. Case 6. The Human Solar Oven. Across Europe, every summer brings the same quiet ritual. People chase the perfect tan. A golden glow that suggests relaxation, health, and the kind of lifestyle that involves beaches instead of office chairs. For most people, this means spending a few hours in the sun with sunscreen and maybe a cold drink nearby. Annalise had a different strategy. She believed she had discovered the ultimate tanning system, not just faster, more efficient, scientifically optimized. Her method involved 3 key components. First, she completely rejected sunscreen. According to her personal theory, sunscreen blocked the sun's beneficial energy. Instead, she covered her entire body in a thick layer of baby oil. Baby oil, for those unfamiliar with its interaction with sunlight, does not protect skin. It essentially turns the human body into something that cooks even faster. Second, she chose a very specific tanning location, the flat black tar roof of her apartment building. Now, black surfaces absorb sunlight extremely well. That's why roads get so hot in the summer. A black roof under direct sun can radiate enormous amounts of heat, which meant Annalise wasn't just tanning. She was tanning on top of a giant solar heat collector. But the real innovation, the crown jewel of her system, was the third component, a reflective mylar emergency blanket. These blankets are designed to reflect heat. They're used in survival kits to trap body warmth in cold environments. Annalise had a different idea. She laid the mirror-like blanket across the roof and stretched out on top of it. The reflective surface would bounce sunlight back onto her body, ensuring every possible ray was concentrated onto her skin. In her mind, she had created the ultimate tanning accelerator. In reality, she had constructed something much closer to a human roasting device. One bright July afternoon, with the sun high and the UV index extremely high, she began her session. Baby oil applied, reflective blanket positioned, black roof beneath her. The heat was intense almost immediately, but to Annalise, that was proof the system was working. The warmth felt like progress, like the golden glow she wanted was arriving faster than ever. The combination of sun, heat, and quiet rooftop air soon made her relaxed, comfortable, drowsy. And then she made the final mistake. She fell asleep. While she slept, her carefully engineered tanning system continued doing exactly what physics demanded. The black roof absorbed sunlight and radiated heat upward. The reflective blanket bounced sunlight back toward her body. The baby oil accelerated the heating process. The air around her became a tiny, trapped microclimate of brutal heat. Her body temperature climbed rapidly. First came dehydration, then heat exhaustion, then the far more dangerous stage, heat stroke. Internally, her organs were overheating. Her body's natural cooling systems failed. Her brain began shutting down as temperatures climbed beyond survivable limits. Meanwhile, her skin, coated in oil, suffered severe burns under the concentrated sunlight. She never woke up. What Annalise believed was a brilliant shortcut to beauty had become a perfectly engineered solar cooker. Her quest for the perfect summer glow had turned into a final, tragic bake. Sometimes the difference between tanning and cooking is simply knowing when to get out of the sun. Case 7. The Warehouse Hammock. After a long day of hard physical work, most people want the same simple thing: a quiet place to sit down, close their eyes, and maybe enjoy a short nap before heading home. For a warehouse worker in Brazil named Paulo, that place was always his hammock. Paulo loved hammocks. They were simple, comfortable, and in his mind, the perfect way to relax after hours of hauling heavy materials. The warehouse where Paolo worked had enormous open spaces and high steel support beams, the kind of structure that could easily support the weight of a hammock. Unfortunately, those beams were also about 20 feet in the air, which meant climbing, and climbing meant effort. Paolo, like many tired people standing near a shortcut, began looking for an easier solution, and then he saw it. 2 tall pallets of cement bags stacked neatly about 15 feet apart. Each pallet towered more than 10 feet high, made from dozens of 50-pound bags of concrete, stacked in careful layers like a giant industrial game of Jenga. To anyone with basic common sense, these stacks looked unstable. To Paolo, they looked perfect. Why climb to the ceiling when he could simply tie his hammock to the top bags of the 2 stacks? They were already the right distance apart. They were heavy, and they were right there. Paolo grabbed the ropes of his hammock and climbed onto one pallet stack. He tied one end securely around the top layer of cement bags. Then he walked over to the second stack and tied the other end. From his perspective, the setup looked great. The ropes were tight, the distance was perfect, and the stacks looked solid enough. What Paolo failed to consider was one simple concept from physics: lateral force. Stacks of heavy objects are designed to hold weight pressing downward. They are not designed to handle strong sideways pulling. When Paolo climbed into the hammock and leaned back, his body weight created exactly that: a powerful sideways pull on the top layers of the stacked pallets. At first, everything seemed fine. He settled into the hammock with a satisfied sigh and began gently rocking back and forth. That gentle rocking was the problem. Each swing pulled slightly harder on the stacks. Each pull shifted the top bags just a fraction of an inch. At first, the movement was almost invisible. Then one of the bags slipped. Then another. Suddenly, the carefully balanced stacks were no longer balanced. The first pallet collapsed with a heavy thud. That movement transferred force to the other side. And just like that, both towering stacks began to fail. What followed was less of a collapse and more of an avalanche. Dozens of 50-pound cement bags tumbled down from 10 feet in the air. Paolo, still trapped in the hammock between them, had nowhere to go. In seconds, tons of concrete bags rained down and buried the hammock completely beneath a mountain of building material. When coworkers arrived, they found a scene that looked less like a workplace accident and more like the aftermath of a construction site landslide. Paolo had wanted a quick nap. Instead, his creative furniture design had turned 2 harmless stacks of cement into a multi-ton trap. It was a brutally simple reminder that when engineers stack materials in neat towers, they're usually not expecting someone to hang a hammock between them. Case 8. The magic charm versus traffic. Human beings have believed in lucky charms for thousands of years. Rabbit's feet, 4-leaf clovers, coins, bracelets blessed by monks. Usually these objects serve one purpose: comfort, a small psychological boost that makes people feel a little safer in an unpredictable world. But for a woman named May in a busy Chinese city, her lucky charm wasn't just a symbol, it was proof. The charm was a small jade pendant that she kept with her at all times. According to May, it had been blessed by a monk and carried powerful spiritual protection. Not vague protection, not metaphorical protection, absolute protection. She genuinely believed the charm made her physically invincible. Most people who carry lucky charms still follow basic survival instincts. They look both ways before crossing the street. They avoid walking into traffic. May did not. Over time, her belief in the charm became so strong that it replaced common sense entirely. She began testing it. Whenever she approached busy intersections, she wouldn't wait for the pedestrian signal. She wouldn't check traffic. Instead, she would step confidently off the curb and walk directly through moving traffic. Cars screeched to a halt. Scooters swerved. Drivers slammed brakes and shouted. But somehow, through pure luck and the reflexes of terrified drivers, she survived every time. And with each close call, her faith grew stronger. To her, it wasn't luck. It was proof that the charm worked. Friends and family begged her to stop. They warned her that she was pushing her luck too far. But May believed she was protected by forces greater than physics. Day after day, she repeated the ritual, walking calmly into traffic, trusting that vehicles would stop before hitting her. And for months, they did. Until one afternoon when she approached a particularly chaotic multi-lane intersection during rush hour. The road was packed with buses, cars, and motorcycles weaving through traffic. Without hesitation, May stepped off the curb and walked straight into the street. At the same moment, a large city bus was approaching the intersection. The driver saw her step into the road and immediately slammed on the brakes. But there is a brutal reality about large vehicles. They cannot stop instantly. A fully loaded city bus weighs several tons. Even with perfect braking, it needs distance to slow down. May looked up just in time to see the enormous metal grille of the bus filling her entire view. For the first time, her confident smile disappeared. The charm in her pocket offered no protection against several tons of moving steel. The bus driver tried, but physics had already decided the outcome. May had spent months believing she was immune to danger, but belief does not override momentum. Her jade charm was beautiful. It just wasn't stronger than a bus. Case 9. The GPS that said turn right. Technology has made modern life incredibly convenient. Your phone can translate languages, your watch can track your heartbeat, your car can guide you through cities you've never seen before. But technology also comes with one important assumption: you are still supposed to think. Robert, a driver in England, had recently discovered the magic of satellite navigation. Like millions of drivers before him, he had quickly developed an absolute trust in the calm, confident voice coming from the dashboard. If the GPS said turn left, you turned left. If the GPS said turn right, you turned right. No questions asked. One rainy evening, Robert was driving through a small coastal town he had never visited before. The streets were dark, narrow, and unfamiliar, but he wasn't worried. His sat-nav knew the way. He had entered the address of a seaside restaurant, and the system was guiding him turn by turn through the maze of roads. Continue for 200 yards, then turn right. The robotic voice was calm, reassuring, completely confident. Up ahead, Robert saw a narrow path sloping down toward the water. The pavement was wet from rain, and warning signs were partially hidden in the darkness. But the GPS had spoken, turn right, so Robert did. The moment his car rolled onto the slope, the tires lost traction on the slick concrete surface. The vehicle began sliding forward faster and faster. What Robert had just driven onto was not a road. It was a boat launch ramp, a steep, algae-covered ramp designed specifically for backing boats into the river. Cars are not meant to drive down these ramps at speed, and they are definitely not meant to reach the end. But Robert had already committed. The car slid helplessly down the ramp and splashed into the freezing water below. For a moment, there was silence. Then panic. The nose of the car, heavy with the engine, immediately began to sink. Water poured into the vehicle through the doors and vents. The electronics shorted out. The lights died. The GPS screen went dark. Robert was suddenly trapped inside a sinking car in the middle of a cold river. Nearby fishermen heard the splash and rushed toward the dock. As they ran closer, they could hear Robert shouting from inside the car. But his words weren't what you might expect. He wasn't yelling about the water. He wasn't screaming for help. Instead, witnesses later reported hearing him shout in pure disbelief. "But the GPS told me to turn here." Even in that moment, Robert seemed unable to accept that the machine might have been wrong, or that he should have looked where he was going. It was a tragically modern mistake. Because GPS systems are amazing tools, they can guide you across continents, but they still rely on one critical component: the human brain behind the steering wheel. And when that part stops asking questions, even the best technology in the world can accidentally lead you straight into a river. Case 10. The cow through the roof. Sophia had always dreamed of building a house that felt close to nature. Not just near nature, part of it. So when she finally had the chance to design her own home in the hills of rural Brazil, she decided to do something unique. She built the house into the side of a hill. Half of the structure was underground, carved directly into the slope. From the outside, it looked almost like the earth itself had grown a small house. It was peaceful, quiet, natural. The roof of the house sat almost perfectly level with the grassy hillside above it. And instead of installing a heavy reinforced roof, Sophia had chosen a simpler option. Corrugated metal sheets supported by wooden beams. It was enough to keep rain out. But there was one detail she had not fully considered. The hill above her house was part of a shared pasture used by her neighbor's cattle. Large cattle. Very large cattle. Among them was a curious 1-ton zebu cow that spent most of its days slowly wandering across the hillside, eating grass and enjoying the quiet countryside. One warm afternoon, the cow wandered a little farther down the slope than usual. Eventually, it stepped onto a flat patch of grass near the bottom of the hill. From the cow's perspective, it was just another comfortable place to stand. From a structural engineering perspective, it was the roof of Sophia's living room. The cow stood there peacefully for a moment, chewing grass and enjoying the view. But corrugated metal roofing is designed to hold rainwater, not a 2,000-pound animal. The beams beneath the roof began to bend. The metal sheets groaned under the pressure. And then the structure finally gave up. With a violent crash of tearing metal and splintering wood, the entire section of roof collapsed. The cow, completely surprised by this turn of events, fell straight through the ceiling. Inside the house, Sophia was reportedly resting on the couch, enjoying a quiet afternoon nap. She never had time to react. A 1-ton animal crashing through a roof from 10 feet above is not something most homes are designed to survive. Emergency crews later described the scene as something out of a surreal cartoon. A destroyed living room, a confused cow standing among the debris, and a house that had learned a very expensive lesson about structural engineering. Sophia had dreamed of living in harmony with nature, and, in a way, nature had certainly visited. Quite literally, through the roof. You know that little voice in your head that sometimes whispers, maybe this isn't the smartest idea? That voice exists for a reason. The 10 people in tonight's stories either ignored it or never heard it at all. And the laws of physics, biology, and extremely large animals responded exactly the way they always do, without mercy. Now I'm curious, which one of these disasters made you say, okay, that person absolutely should have seen that coming? The radioactive slimming belt? The frozen turkey deep fryer? Or the cow that decided to redecorate someone's living room from above? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you enjoy these autopsies of catastrophic decision-making, hit like, subscribe, and come back for the next episode. Because history is full of bad ideas, and we've only scratched the surface.